Right, so today, just a little bit of housekeeping so that you can see what we're going to be doing this week. I put what do you call it? What do they call it? A news item there for this week. We have 2 labs this week, Lab 7 and Lab 8. They'll be easier to do after the lecture, I hope. But you've already seen a little bit of Python, so it really shouldn't be too hard for you. I hope that you won't have too much trouble. However, we will be doing them in a lab lesson. So the next lesson, I'll show you how to do it. Maybe some of you like to try and do it before I show you how to do it, but I will show you how to do it in the next lesson. I wanted to make some other points here about the assignments. Assignments are 10% of the course. It's an easy 10 marks. So everybody should get those 10 marks. So just in case you haven't sort of thought about this or maybe didn't get those 10 marks before, now's your chance. The assignment is basically going to code.org, and you need to sign up for our class. So in section 21, our class, you use this code to sign into our class if you haven't already done it. And then you need to work your way through the exercises, not all the exercises which I've mentioned here. So that's exercises 1, 2, and 3. You know, that's the Angry Birds, and that's the stuff we started out with. And then last week we had some extras that we added to it, 10, 12, 15, and 16. That was last week. This week we're adding 3 more, 22, 25, and 26. So you do all those. I check it on code.org. I can see your name. You should have created an account with your name. I see that. You've done it. You get your 10 marks. Bonus, right? So everybody's going to do that, I hope. And I want you to succeed. That's one way to succeed. Yeah, so the other thing is, of course, doing the labs. You also get 10 marks for the labs if they're all done. How I mark the labs is, you see, you've handed in marks, labs, and you've seen the marks I give you. What I do in the end is I put a spreadsheet. I add all the marks from the labs together and divide it by the number of labs. So if you miss labs, that brings your marks down. So try and make sure that you do all the labs. Same with the tutorials. I throw the tutorial mark in with the lab. And so if you hand them all in, you're likely to get 10 or near to 10 for all of your marks for the labs too. So, you know, do those things that makes the marks easier. You know, the test mark is a little harder. That's 20%. If you can do good in the test, which some of you can, that's bonus too, I guess. And the final is 30%. Anyways, I think that's enough on sort of that. I have been trying over the last couple of weeks to give you guys a little bit of Python as it comes. So today, formally, we start talking about Python. So from now on, when we have a problem, we're going to use Python as our tool to solve that problem. So it won't just be drawing flowcharts and pseudocode. You'll be expected to do Python. And there will probably be a question in the exam where you have a problem and you solve it using Python. You will write some Python code. Okay? Now, when I say in the exam, you'll write Python code, you won't be doing it with the idle. You'll be doing it with a paper and a pen, paper and pencil, and you'll write your code like that. So it would be good if you knew the syntax. The syntax is quite important. Syntax is wrong, the program doesn't work. Now, actually, that's kind of lucky for you in the pencil and paper, because I can look and say, oh yeah, you made that little mistake in syntax, but most of it's okay, so you get most of the marks. Whereas if we were doing it with on the computer, we could say, oh, program doesn't work, no marks. No, we never mark like that, but I can imagine a situation where somebody might. So how does Python code work? The one line at a time thing, that's because Python is run with an interpreter. Remember, we talked about interpreters and compilers. Compiler takes a program and takes the whole thing, translates it into binary code, and then stores it in a file. Then the entire file is loaded into the memory. It's around in the classroom somewhere. Sorry. Stores the entire thing in memory, and then that memory is come up and it works. Now with the interpreter, it's just one line of code at a time goes through the memory, and that is consistent with the Van Neumann architecture. Remember, fetch, decode, execute. Now the other point here that's made is about the hash symbol. The hash symbol. When you put a hash symbol into your Python code, everything to the right of that on that line will be ignored by the interpreter. And so that's how it becomes a comment for us, because we can see it. The other thing is the editor that you use to write your Python code will turn that code red. Everything that's to the right of a hash symbol will be red. That indicates to you, if you're reading it, that that's just a comment. It will not be part of the program. So you can put anything you want there. What we tend to do is we put comments in there that would be like, okay, this person wrote this code, you know, and or this bit of code does this, that type of thing will be in there. Now, the indentation, I can't overstress this. So what I mean by that is any little mistake in the indentation, if it's out by one space, then the program's not going to work the way you want, may not work at all. So the indentation is very, very important that you get that right. What you've got to help you to get the indentation right is we use, for every control structure in our Python code, we use a colon, all right? And then what is indented after the colon is part of that control structure. So to make that easier for us, what the editor does is when the editor sees a colon followed by the carriage return or the enter key, you put the colon in and then you hit the enter key, it will automatically do the indent for you. And so don't touch any backspace, don't touch any tab, don't touch any space, right? When we're doing this, when we get to the end of the line, if it's a colon, means it's a control structure, we just press enter. It'll take us to the next space. Then we type our code. When we get to the end of that line, we just press enter. It'll go to the right place. And it's only when we want to get out of that control structure, we will do one backspace, and that'll take us back to the next level. And very important that we do it that way. You know what I mean? Sort of backspacing or using our space bar. Don't use your space bar for any indents, right? And the reason why is because, well, you might be lucky and get that right, but it works on the tabs, and tabs in your editors could be set up differently. In one editor, it might be 3 tabs, 3 spaces to a tab. In another editor, it might be 2 spaces to a tab. Do you know which one it is? Well, probably you don't. And so better to just do the tab, right? Anyway, so there's a question. Do you have to do the hash symbol, the hashtag? Yeah. Okay. Now the reason why I hesitated is it is a hash symbol, but it's not a hashtag like in social media. We don't use it for searching. What happened? Do you have to put comments in? No, your program would work without the hashes unless. Okay, so to get marks in this course, I have to know that it's yours. Right. So I will expect a hash with your name and student number, right, for each bit of program. So I know it's yours. But other than that, there's not much comments that you have to make. Did I answer? Yeah. Okay, so you know what I'm expecting. I'm expecting in your program, you'll say, oh, okay, I wrote this, you know, hash the student number and your name. So about the variables. Last week, we worked on pseudocode, and you saw with the pseudocode, whenever we had a new variable, we had to specify what is the type of data that's stored in that variable. With Python, we don't have to do that. The first time we store data in a variable, Python will automatically detect what type of data it is from the data that you put there, and that will be the type of that data. All right, so so that's half the solution, because you might say, well, what if it detects the wrong type for what I want to do? Well, what you can do is you can change the type. We've got a way of doing that, and we call that casting. And I'll show you that either today or later this week. I will show you that. But other thing about variables, when we create a variable, remember from our first lecture in this course, we said what happens with a variable. What you're doing is you take a little bit of the memory of the computer and you assign that memory location. The memory has a location which is indexable, and the computer operating system can find that place in the memory. So what we do is we say we take that little bit of memory and we give it a name with which we can refer to it. So we can put into our computer program, go to that bit of memory and put this stuff in. Okay, and so the name that we use to attach to that bit of memory, we call that our variable, right? Now, you can use all 3 of these things as a variable, but you should know that the Python interpreter will treat them as different. Those are three different variables. Does that make sense to you? In other words, Python looks at the case. A big L is different than a little l. All right. So these would be three different variables, and it's kind of bad to use those actually. So our the way that we try to do it, I guess you could say best practice or standard that we use is kind of the same as we did with the pseudocode, is that our variables are going to use lowercase. We're going to use lowercase. We use actually lower camel case, which means if our variable is made up of 2 or more words, the second word will and the third word will have the first letter capitalized. But otherwise, we don't use full uppercase like this. We reserve that for our constants. And we don't start off our variables with a capital. We can start off our variable with any letter, and we can also start it off with a underscore. We can use special characters, but not for the first character. Okay, for the first one, use a letter of the alphabet or an underscore. And then we can use special characters after that, and we can use numbers. But you can't use a number to start off the name of a variable with a number. All right, so always use a letter of the alphabet to start the name of the, just the capitalization is it's an issue of good style. Your program will work if you use the capitalization wrong, but it's not good style. I mean, you want to have good style. You want people to be able to read your code. Quite possibly, yes. So are there marks for style? Yeah, quite possibly, yes. So you should do it in the right way. But I guess what I'm saying is, yes, you could lose marks on it because you didn't use used capitalization when you shouldn't have. But your Python interpreter wouldn't tell you that it's wrong. You know, as far as Python's concerned, it's okay. Program works. It's just that some mean teacher would look at it and say, oh, you did that in a bad way, so I'll take a mark off. I might. Yeah, okay, you get the idea. All right, so how we create a variable, we give a name, and then we use that equal symbol. But when we're creating a variable, equal doesn't mean equal like in mathematics equals. It means assigns a value or takes the value of. And so here, these statements here are actually the green stuff I'm just looking at without the dot. The dot is just a, it's just a dot point for the slide, right? So ignore the dots. Num takes the value of 2. Because the value is an integer, num will be an integer variable, right? Automatically, just because you got a 2 there. That would be an integer variable. Now, if you put quotes around the 2, then it would be a string or a character. Does that make sense? Yeah. If you put double quotes around it. Likewise, we got a new variable here called DEC, I guess stands for dec or des. And then we're, sorry about my cursor. Where'd my cursor go? Oh, there it is. We've got a new dec, and it's taking the value of 2.1. Automatically, it will be a float. We don't have to say that it's float. Python will do that for us automatically. And likewise, when it sees these quotes, it knows that that's a string, right? So a string is going to be made up of any characters you like in there. So you notice this has got spaces, it's got a special character like a question mark. You could have ats, you could have underscores, you could have all kinds of stuff in there, as long as it's got the double quotes on it, and you could use single quotes too. But that whole thing together is one big string. Now, the thing about a string is a special kind of variable. It's a kind of variable that is a complex variable because it's made up of smaller parts. Now, the smaller parts that make up a string are the characters. So each position in the string is a character, and each character is addressable and accessible, that we can get that individual character. And we'll look at that a bit later too. So we can do a bunch of mathematics. At this point, I think I'd like to recommend to you W3 Schools. I don't know if any of you guys have ever used W3 Schools. You may have used W3 Schools. It's a good resource that will help you with this, and I'll show you what I mean. W3 Schools. I'm going to put a search in here, W3 Schools, for Python operators. Now, the operators are those things that we've got a W3 Schools. It's a free to use web resource that has tutorials in it. You can sort of learn from it, but So this slide, we're talking about operators, and you'll see in the slide that we've got the addition operator, the subtraction operator, the multiplication operator, the division operator, and we've got this thing called floor division. In our notes, we called it integer division, but it doesn't show these other two. But if so, any of those that you're interested in, you can go there, you can see how they work, give you examples, you can try it in some code. It's really, really quite nice. We got some other things with assignment. We're not even going to do this stuff in this course, right? But you know, if you're keen on this stuff, go and spend some time on it afterwards. It's really, really very cool in W3 Schools. So W3 Schools, please look at the top up there, right? It's got all these resources for helping you to do Python, but you're probably also going to do web pages. And W3 Schools has training on web pages. So HTML and CSS and JavaScript are all web pages. Also, you'd use SQL and PHP for web pages. So a lot of and Java, jQuery and web pages, a lot of stuff there to help you with your developing web pages, writing little computer programs. W3 Schools, I recommend it. The other thing that I'd recommend for you, if you want to learn some more, and that is just using good old YouTube. So YouTube, if you go and if you're using it, I mean, I have my own channel in YouTube. That's where I put all of our stuff. But so, for example, I don't know anything about Python, imagine, and I want somebody to tell me. I want to be passive. I want somebody to just spend, I don't know, 4 hours talking to me about Python. Yeah, no problem. He'll talk to you for 4 hours about Python. This guy will talk to you for 6 hours about Python. Or maybe you don't want to listen for that long. I don't know, maybe you want to just get started with 1 hour or whatever. And yeah, there's a lot. And you know, if you're sitting around at the airport somewhere, you got an hour to spend, you could watch people with videos about cats, or you could learn about Python. Yeah. It's up to you, right? I would watch the cats. No, I wouldn't. Just kidding. So there's some operators. As I said, this is not a comprehensive list. If you would, so there was a couple of operators that you might have seen on that W3 Schools page that are not here. That was the 2 asterisks together. That's exponent raised to the power. So sometimes you might want to raise something to the power. You can use exponent. So instead of, this one is for multiplication. The other one that it showed on there was modulo division, which was a percent sign. And we don't have to do that in this course, but you will have to do it next course, pretty much guaranteed. So those things you will come across. All right, so what are some things we've got here, right? If you take, we've got 2 different divisions here, right? We got a division with 1 slash and a division with 2 slashes. What does that mean? It just means this. If you take the number, you create a variable, let's call it A, and you say A is equal to 10 divided by 3. All right, so A would actually be the number 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, you know, that would be it, right? Correct? Now, what if you did this? A takes the value of 10, 3. All right, what this one will give you is it'll just give you 3. So in other words, the decimal part of the number is deleted. Okay, so we call it integer division. It's a way of truncate. Truncate means to cut the end off of. Cut the end off of, so it cuts the end off the, or rounds the number down. So that's why it was called floor division. If you look on the W3 Schools, it calls it floor division because it finds the floor, right? It does the division and it removes everything from the end. This is the floor, all right? That we remove the decimal part of the number. So you would use those at different times. I've got somebody in the chat. That's Farheen. Yeah, okay, Farheen. Oh, you know what? Am I recording? No, I am recording, so that's good. It's so I'm recording this, Farheen, so you can look at it later too. So good. So this number here, these 2 numbers are integers. So what I'm talking about, Farheen, is the number 10 divided by 3 gives us a number 3.33333. That's a float. A float means that it has a decimal portion to the number. And so whenever we use a division sign, we're probably going to need to have a float number to accept that value, unless we use the integer division or floor division. any normal division, we would need a float number to accept the value of that calculation. Now, we do have this way of taking a number and converting it from one data type to another data type. So for example, I could take this, I could say A takes the value of 5. Okay, what A is going to be is it's going to be an integer. And then I could do this. I could say B takes the value of float A. And then if I went and I printed B, what I would see is it would print like this. It would print 5.0. And the reason it would print 5.0 is because B is a float number, because I specified that B has to be a float. But how do I create B? I take A and convert the value to a float value, and that's B. So B would be, a float value would have to be 5.0. So that's the difference between this one. If I printed A, it would just be 5, because A is an integer value. But B is a float value of the same, and it has a decimal part to it. So float, my-var, like that, is a way of forcing it to take a different data type. We call that casting, where we take one data type and we change it to another. We call that casting. And so you can do that with any data type. Here, we're forcing it to be a float. Here, we're forcing it to be an integer. You've seen me do this before when I played around with you, showing you a little bit of Python code, and especially when I do the inputs, when I get an input of a number, because I want the number to work. So therefore, I have to convert it to an integer. So you've seen me do that int, then open brackets, and then do the input. See me do this? Int. So x takes the value of int input. And then enter a number or something. So what this int does is it takes the input, which is going to be string. Everything that you type on an input is going to be string as far as Python is concerned. And so we don't want it as string. We need to change it to an integer so we can do math with it. If we don't want to do math with it, if all we want to do is print it out and stuff, we can just leave it as string. But if we want to do math with it, then we should convert it to an integer first. And we do that by casting. So I mentioned to you a minute ago that a string is a special type of variable. It's a complex variable that's made up of smaller parts, the smaller parts each being a character. And so, for example, what we're doing here is we're taking a variable, we're creating a variable called greeting, and we're putting these characters in it. Then we're taking another variable called subject, and we're putting those characters in it. What we can do is we can actually put them together. Now, this is not, well, what does it look like? It looks like addition, right? I guess you could call it addition. We actually use another word for it. We use the word concatenation. Can I show the question? Yeah. There isn't a question, Farhina. I'm just showing the string. I hope that you're seeing that. Can you not see the yeah, it says I'm showing the screen. When I do it in Python, I'll show that. But what this is doing is it's going to take this and it's going to add that to it. And the order that it puts it in is quite important, right? If I had said subject plus greeting, then it would be everyone hello. But because it says greeting plus subject, what will end up happening is it'll be hello, everyone. So we can do that. Well, shall we do it? Yeah, why not? Why not? So Farhan's not quite sure what I'm doing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start up idle. We're just going to do that. Now, when you start up idle, where are you, idle? You see the three chevrons? I want you to look here. You see the three chevrons, and here it says shell. When we're in the shell, we will have the three chevrons as the prompt. By chevrons, I mean the greater than sign. So when you see the three chevrons and you see the thing that says shell, what that means is you're in one line at a time mode. You won't be able to go back and edit a line. Once you leave that line, it's gone. You can only work up one line at a time. That's not ideal. You've got another way of doing it, which is if you go into the file menu, you can create a new file. And when you create a new file, you'll be in an editor, which looks like a word processor. And in word processor, as you know, you can go up and around and edit. So you can edit the entire thing. I mean, Python's still going to work on it one line at a time, but you have a chance of working on it the whole file at a time so that you can move around a bit. So when we write our programs, we usually create a file. We don't do it one line at a time because once we done that line, we can't edit it again. It's gone. But we could do this, right? We could say greeting takes the value of hello. And then we could say, what was the second one? Subject takes the value of everyone. Okay, so if I print, I can print greeting. So what I'm printing there is I'm printing the variable greeting. And so it should say hello. Or I could do this, print. This is going to be a very different result. What do you expect this is going to do? It'll print the word greeting because I'm saying print the string. Because this time I didn't. This time I don't have a variable. I have a string. All right. So I've got greeting. Well, look, this one I'm going to do. I don't know what total greeting or full greeting or yeah. Full is going to take the value of greeting plus subject. Okay, now what would happen when I do a print on full, do you think? What do you expect? Hello, everyone. Yes, but it's not very nice because it runs it together. So to make it look nice, I probably should put a space in between it, right? And so how I could do that, and look, I can't go up and edit any of this, right? This is gone. But I can do it again, and I can say full now takes the value of greeting plus a space, okay? Plus, what's the other one? Subject. And now print full. You'll see when we, I got a capital there, that would not work, would it? So somehow I hit the caps lock. So now I can print it and I get the space in there. Let's do this one here and we'll call it back. Back takes the value of, this time we're going to do subject first, right? Then we're going to do a space. And then we're going to do the other one, which is greeting. Got to spell it right. I mean, you can't. All right. So what do you think will happen when I go and print back? Just guessing. Everyone, hello. Because it took, so you see, I switched them around by changing the order that they were in the concatenation. The order is important in the concatenation. So whichever one comes first, whichever one's on the left in my concatenating, that's going to be in the left in the new string. So that's a way you could use to reverse strings around. If you wanted to take your name and make it in the opposite direction, you could do that. So keep that in mind. That might come up as a problem sometime. Probably not, but you never know. Anyway, so I hope that makes some sense to us, right? So we can add strings together. When we do that, we don't call it addition. We call it concatenation. Concatenation. It's a word that you should know. It'll probably show up in a multiple choice question. I would say almost guaranteed. All right, so we have some. So because strings are a special kind of variable in Python, which is really a very well-developed programming language. And I've tried to make this point to you a lot of times. Just because it's the first programming language that you may have seen, it's not baby programming, okay? This is the real deal. People use this to program routers and switches. They use it to write applications on your mobile phone, the applications that work on web pages. So it's a real deal. It has a lot of very nice libraries that make it very powerful. And some of the things that it has to make it powerful are included here, right? So we can do a lot of stuff with strings. So a string is treated as an object because it's object-oriented programming, right? So it's treated as an object, and so you have methods that work with that string. We have this here, which is a len function. We have some functions also in the library. We have functions and methods that work on it. The len, what it will do is it returns a value of the count of how many characters in that string. So if you create a string and you want to know how long it is, you can use len to tell you how long it is, and it'll give you a number. And that's very good if you wanted to use a loop to process every value in that string. You could first find out how many times you're going to do the loop. You could use len to do that. So hello, the len of hello is going to return a value of 5 because there's 5 characters in there. The other thing, as I said, and I mentioned this a couple of times in this lecture already, so thinking about it, a string is a complex variable. It's made up of a bunch of components. Those components are individual characters. Each of those individual characters can be addressed and can be accessed by its index. So what's the index? The index starts at first position, which we label as index number 0, and goes to the last position, which is just counted through. So in this hello, which has 5 positions, the first position is index value 0 up to index value 4, which is the end of it, right? So working from left to right, sorry, I've lost my curse. So there it is. So 0 is the index position that holds the character capital H, right? And then 1, and then position 1, then position 2, etc. So that means that, and very nice thing in Python is you could write a lot of little programs and methods, etc., to do all kinds of things with these individual characters in the string. So you could take some of those characters out of the string. We would call that a substring. And this is how that works. You can see that at the bottom of the page there. If you open, notice bracket is square bracket. So we use the square brackets to use the index on the string. So the square brackets means we're going to use the index. If we just used a single number, if we just said open square bracket 1 and close the square bracket, that would mean take the character at position 1, which would be the E. But because it's opening the square brackets and we've got a 1 and then we've got a colon and another number, what that means is, okay, starting at position 1, but finishing before position 4, get all of those values. And so that's why it's going to get the values in positions 1, 2, and 3. So greeting 1:4 would be the substring ELL. And so it's kind of cool. You can get different parts of a string from it. So as I mentioned, a string is treated as an object. And so we have some methods that work on that object. Here's some other methods. We use upper. Now, these dots here, again, they're just for the PowerPoint. They're not important, but we do use a dot with methods on an object. And so you'll see when I actually implement this, that we do use a dot with it, right? So you see that here is the name of the string. The string is called greeting, and the dot upper means that we're going to use this, this method on that string. So the entire string will be converted to uppercase. And in this case, the entire string would be converted to lowercase. Well, let's see if we can do that on in our PowerPoint. Sorry, in our Python. So I think I got that right. So I've got a string called full. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, well, just print. Just going to use the print command. I'm going to do the, so full dot upper. And because it's a method, I have to use the, and let's see. So it puts everything in uppercase. Have I got anything that's in lowercase? Well, let's take a thing and I'll call it upper full. I could say, okay, well, I'm going to take that full and I'm going to convert it to upper. And when I print upper full, it should be the same as what I had before, right? Yeah. And so what if I wanted to lower it? Takes the upper full and converts that to lower. Print And so everything will be lower. So you can convert things upper, lower. We've got some other nice little methods that go with the strings. These are string manipulation methods. They're kind of fun. And so you may find a time when you need to or want to use those. Right, so setting aside strings for a minute. The next part of the lesson until the end of the lesson is dealing with our if. And so we're going to deal with the if in 3 different ways. We're going to do an if just by itself. We're going to do an if else, and which in pseudocode we would say if then else, right? But we're just going to do it in Python. We don't use then. We just say if else. And the other way of doing it is if else. And that would be if we wanted to do a nested. So if by itself is this thing here. Now notice that we've got the condition. By the way, the green brackets there, they're optional. That's just to make it more readable. You could, and you will often see if statements without the brackets. That's fine, works. The red stuff, the colon is not optional. The colon is what makes this work. Now, remember what I said is when we're writing this, we'll put our condition and then we'll put the colon and then don't touch any backspace, don't touch any tab, don't touch any space, right? Just hit enter and it will automatically bring you down to the next line with the tab, whatever has been set in that editor at the right place. And then when we type our next line, when we get to the end of that line, don't type any backspace, don't type any spaces and no tabs, just hit enter and it'll bring you down to the exact same space. And then you type that. When we're finished, when we got to this point, we said, those are all the things that I wanted to do if that condition was true. So I'm finished that. So what I'll do before I put in my next statement is I'll do an enter to go down to the next line, and then I'll do a backspace. And that will unindent me. And then I should be lined up with the start of the if statement. And what this means is this instruction down the bottom here, which says outside the if, this instruction is not controlled by the if. This instruction is totally divorced from the if. It's nothing to do with the if. It's always going to be evaluated. It's always going to be processed. Whereas the things that are inside the if, where is my cursor? These two things, they will only be processed if the condition is true. So if the condition is true, what will be processed is these two things, but this will always be processed, whether this is true or not, right? If this is false, this is still going to be processed. If it's true, this is still going to be processed, right? This was always going to be processed because it's outside the if. Now we've got an example of how to do that. And I think what a good thing to do with this example is to actually take this example and put it into Python so we can see it working. And what we can do with Python is we can use our, I told you there's 2 ways of working with the Python editor, right? We can do it 1 line at a time, or we can do it in a file. So I'm going to do that. So I won't use this because this is the shell. If I see it's a shell, it's not what I want. And I see that the cursor is on a chevron. So I'm going to create a new file. And I'm going to say that this is the age thing or something. It's about ages and 18 or something like that. And so I'm going to put that program in there just by pasting it. Now, I've done this with a couple of classes, so I know that there's some errors in this program. So let's see if we can fix the errors. We'll try and run it, and you'll probably see those errors come up. Oh, we have to save it first. Age 18. Okay, yeah, save that. Oh, well, it didn't come up with an error. How about that? How old are you? Now, that's lucky. It came up with errors with the other classes, so. You know what? I'm gonna run it again so that we have a clean output screen. So there we go. There's our clean output screen that I was telling you about. How old are you now? You got choice, right? In the condition, it's either going to be bigger than 18 or it's not. That's the condition. So depending on whether I put an age that's bigger than 18 or an age that's not bigger than 18, then we'll get a different result. So if I put an age that's bigger than 18, it'll go and do this stuff here. If I put an age that's not bigger than 18, it will skip those and go down to this one here, right? So let's try that. Let's put 18. 18 is not bigger than 18, is it? 18 is equal to 18. So that should just say, who can predict?
Have a nice day.
Perfect. It will say, have a nice day. Now, if I run it again, this time I'm going to put bigger than 18. I'm going to put 19. What do you expect it's going to say this time? Well, it should say that you are, take your age. Yes. Okay. And it's going to double it and print that out. It's going to say you're 19 years away from being 38. In 19 years, you'll be 38. Yeah. So in the second case, yeah, this isn't the one that, it's the second one that we had the errors in. We'll see it in a second. I'm sorry. All right, back to this, because we want to finish eventually. We don't want to be here all day. What if we have a if-else structure? Now, the way if-else works in Python is the same way it works in pseudocode. It's true-false thing, right? So what's happening is you have one condition. If the condition is true, then we do this stuff. That's as if there was a then there, but there isn't. Notice we have to have the colon. If the condition, and then we have a colon here too, right? If the condition is true, we do this stuff. Else, we do this stuff. So else is what we do if it's false. Now, what about the thing at the bottom? We always do that. We always do that. So we do this only if it's true. We do this only if it's false. But this stuff at the very bottom, we always do it. Got it? Only if it's true, only if it's false, but always. Yeah, easy peasy. Okay, this is the one that's got the errors in it, sorry. But I'm going to put this one in as well, and we'll find those errors and get them out. Copy that, put it into our Python code. It's almost the same at the top. So the errors are in the bottom, right? So the errors are actually in this. And it's weird, right? Because actually, when you look at this, when I change it to get the errors out, you won't be able to tell the difference in this line of code. So there's some special characters in the PowerPoint that are not compatible with the Python editor, but we'll see that. Let's run it now. So it'll just save it again and it'll come up with that error. So it says that that's not valid. Okay. So if you're copying code from some weird editor or from somewhere like a PowerPoint, you could get errors like this. And so if you do that, we'll just, take it out and re-enter it by hand. So remaining takes a value of 18 minus age. Pretty sure that's what it was. Now we've got another error, which is a logic error, because we don't want to say their age, they'll be that. We actually want to change this to remaining. So I'm going to change that to remaining. Now I think it might work without these errors in it. Okay, so how old are you? So if it's true, we're going to, if the person's age is over 18, it's going to say this. You've seen this before, right? So 19, it works the same if they're 19. But let's run it with them being 18 this time. If they're 18, what should it do? 18 minus 18 is going to be 0. It should say, in 0 years, you will be 18. Let's try. In 0 years, you'll be 18. And then it always says, have a nice day. Always says, have a nice day, because have a nice day is outside the if structure. So let's do it. Yeah, so that's that one. The other thing that, yeah, it's either bigger than 18 or it isn't. Yeah, so now we've got the else is working there. Yeah, all right, so let's go to the next bit of code. We're almost done this. And so I hope this is making sense to you. What we can have is we can have a nested if. And if we do that, one of the best ways to do it, there's more than one way to do it, but this way to do it is with an elif. If we use elif, we can have readable code. You could do an else and then an if, but elif is neater and everybody knows what it means. It means else if, and it's easy to read code. So what this works is, if this condition is true, then we do this. But do you see there's 3 lots of program structure here? Program structure 1, program structure 2, program structure 3. If condition 1 is true, we do the stuff here but we don't do any of this. We skip the elif and we skip the else, because the else only works with the elif. And if this is true, we skip the elif. So we skip all the way through the outside. Okay. So if this is true, we do this and we skip all the way to the end to here. Now, if this is false, then we have to go to the elif. And then we check a new condition. If it's true, we do this stuff. And if that's true, we skip. And we don't look at this. But if this is false, we go and check this. This is false. Then we get to this else. The only way we get to this else is if all the conditions above are false. Does that make sense? So in the end, we only do one of these three things. We do this. If this one's true, we do this, and we don't do those two. If this one's false, we don't do this, and we check this. And if this is true, we do this, and then we don't do those two. And if this is false, we do this, and we don't do those two. So we're only going to do one of the options. All right, so it's a very sort of important that you understand that we're only going to do one of those options. Yes, Abdullah. Yeah, okay, and I think we've done on the board in pseudocode, enter mark. Yeah, if mark is bigger than 90, then A. Else if, or we can say elif, mark is bigger than 75, B. Elif, mark is bigger than 60, C. Else, F. Okay, it's only one of those things. You don't get an A and a B and a C. You get one, right? You either get an A or you get a B or you get a C or you get a, you only get one of those. And so that's how it works. We only get one of these. So here's the code sort of fixed in that way. Yeah, let's look at it. Now, we've got the elif in there. Should we take the entire code? Yeah, why not? We're going to have the error still in there. So I have to fix the error, but you've seen it now, and maybe you've already got an idea how to fix that error. So we saw that our error was in the input. It didn't like that input, right? Because that was the problem that, and you couldn't even see that, right? You couldn't even see that. You go to run this. So this is the thing about programming. I really encourage you to just practice it, because how would you know by looking at that that's an error? I can't see the error. Can you see the error? But once you try it, you'll find out, oh, this is weird. There's an error in there because we picked up some character, which we can't even see, which is messing up our program. And that's quite possible because different word processors, a PowerPoint, it's a very complex program. If you look at the stuff that's stored from PowerPoint, there's a lot of stuff in there. It's quite possible that there's a character that's going to mess up our Python. And that's what we've got. So that's why we've got to get rid of it. Get rid of that bad character, which we can't even see. All right. So we got rid of it. The other thing was there was a logic error here because we were printing the wrong variable. So the point that I was making about that, you just need to practice. Okay. The old saying that I used to have when I started programming, I learned to program at 2 o'clock in the morning. And what I mean by that is the first program that I tried to write on a microcomputer, I think I started writing at 4 in the afternoon, and at 2 o'clock in the morning, it started working. You get the idea, right? After all the errors in it. Yeah, so it was a bit bigger program than this, of course. All right, so let's run that and see what we get. All right, how old are you? Now, anything over 18 is just like we expected. It's going to say the thing about double, right? So let's do 20. It's going to say in 20 years, you'll be 40. Have a nice day. Why? Because we always say have a nice day because it's outside the if structure. Yeah. So if they say 20, it's going to be 40 years. If they say, what's going to happen if they say their age is 17? It's going to say you got so many 17. So 17 is not bigger than 18, but it is bigger than 12. So it's going to do this stuff, right? It's going to say you got so many years until you're you got 1 year until you're 18. Have a nice day. So what's going to do if I run it and I say my age is 11? Remember, only one of those three things is going to happen. So the program's going to go here. Is 11 bigger than 18? No, so it's false. So it has to go and it has to go to the elif. Then it's going to test that. Is 11 bigger than 12? No, so it has to do this. The only thing it's going to say is you're too young. Have a nice day. Let's see. Enter. You're too young. Have a nice day. Okay, so it works perfectly. Soon you'll be writing programs like that too, inshallah. And I think that's all. All right, so what I'm going to do is, I think I'm done there. Maybe you have some programs, some questions. I don't know, Farheen, you good? And maybe she's still there. Otherwise, I'm going to end the program, the sharing, when I say the program, I mean Zoom. Yeah, let's end it. Okay, see you later, Farheen. Good luck.